Ambassador Jinho Kim walked slowly through the massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber. His black suit stood out among the colorful robes and strange body coverings of the alien representatives. Behind him, Colonel Min-Soo Park carried a thick folder of military reports, while diplomatic aide So Young Lee checked her translation device one last time. The chamber was huge. Thousands of seats rose up in circles, filled with beings from across the galaxy. Some looked like giant insects, others were made of pure light, and some had tentacles instead of arms. At the center sat the High Chancellor, a creature that looked like a floating jellyfish made of stars. Jinho had been coming to these meetings for 3 years. Every time, he brought the same warning. Every time they ignored him. "The session will begin," announced the High Chancellor in a voice that sounded like singing crystals. First matter, the human proposal for military preparation. Jinho stood up from his seat. Around him, thousands of alien eyes turned to look at him. Most of them were not friendly. "Honored members," Jinho began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber speakers. "Our deep space scouts have found something terrible. The Void Swarm is moving toward our galaxy. They have already destroyed 3 star systems in the outer darkness. We must prepare our defenses now, before it is too late." A sound like angry bees filled the chamber. The aliens were not happy. The Luminari representative rose from her seat. She looked like a person made of glowing mist. "Ambassador Kim speaks of war again," she said, her voice cold as ice. "Humans always want to fight. They see enemies everywhere. This is not about wanting to fight." Jinho replied, trying to stay calm. "This is about survival. The Void Swarm does not negotiate. It does not make peace. It only destroys." Colonel Park opened his folder and pulled out photographs. The images showed dead worlds, planets stripped of all life, turned into gray dust floating in space. "These pictures were taken by our fastest scout ships." Jinho continued. "The swarm moves like a cloud of metal locusts. Everything they touch dies. They will be here in 18 months. The Kethvar delegate stood up next. He was tall and thin, with 6 arms and eyes all over his head. "Humans have been saying this for years," he said with disgust. "Always more weapons. Always more warships. We are tired of your fear." "It is not fear," Jinho said, his voice getting louder. "It is wisdom." The chamber erupted in angry sounds. Aliens clicked, buzzed, and roared at each other. Some pointed at the humans with claws and tentacles. Others made rude gestures that meant the same thing in any language. So Young leaned close to Jinho and whispered, "Sir, the translation shows they are calling us war-loving primitives and violent children." Jinho closed his eyes for a moment. He had known this would happen, but it still hurt. The High Chancellor raised one glowing tentacle, and the noise stopped. "The Council will vote," she announced. "All those in favor of the human military proposal?" Only 12 hands, claws, and tentacles rose up, out of thousands. All those against. The chamber filled with raised appendages. 847 votes against the humans. All those who choose not to vote. 3 more aliens raised their hands. The High Chancellor's voice rang out like a funeral bell. "The motion fails." Furthermore, this council formally condemns the human delegation for continued warmongering and aggressive behavior toward peaceful species. Jinho felt something cold settle in his stomach. He looked at Colonel Park, who was already closing the folder of defense plans. So Young was staring at the floor, tears in her eyes. Slowly, Jinho stood up. The chamber fell silent as he gathered his papers. His movements were careful and deliberate, like a man packing for a very long journey. "You have made your choice," Jinho said quietly, but his voice carried to every corner of the massive room. "You have decided that the galaxy does not need Earth's protection." He picked up his briefcase and walked toward the aisle. Colonel Park and So Young followed him. "So be it," Jinho continued, still walking. "But when the darkness comes for you, when your worlds burn and your people scream for help, remember this moment. Remember that you chose this." The aliens watched in confused silence as the 3 humans walked down the long aisle toward the exit. Their footsteps echoed loudly in the quiet chamber. At the massive doors, Jinho stopped and turned around one last time. Thousands of alien faces stared back at him. Some looked angry, some looked confused, but a few looked worried. "Goodbye," Jinho said simply. The doors closed behind them with a sound like thunder. Outside in the corridor, So-Young activated her communication device and sent a single message to Earth. The message had only 2 words: come home. Within hours, the order would reach every human colony, every trade station, every military base scattered across the galaxy. The greatest withdrawal in galactic history was about to begin. The Council had spoken. Humanity was no longer welcome at the table. But soon, the galaxy would learn what it meant to eat alone in the dark. Admiral Dongwu Choi stood on the bridge of his massive warship, watching screens that showed the biggest moving operation in galactic history. Across 12 sectors of space, humanity was packing up and going home. "Report," he said to his second-in-command. Captain Haijin Nam looked at her datapad. "Sir, colonies 7 through 15 are empty now. All the people are on transport ships heading back to human space. The trade stations are being stripped clean. We will be completely gone in 2 days." On the mining planet Zirian far below, Foreman Taehyun Cho was supervising the removal of giant machines that had been digging precious metals from the ground for 300 years. The machines were so big that it took 10 cargo ships just to carry one of them. The native Zirians stood around watching with their big purple eyes wide with shock. These aliens looked like walking trees with faces, and they had never seen anything like this before. "Why are you leaving?" asked Elder Morka, the leader of the local Zirians. "You have been here since my grandfather's grandfather was young. This is your home, too." Taehyun wiped sweat from his face as another massive drill was loaded onto a transport ship. "Not anymore," he said sadly. "Your council made it clear that humans are not wanted." "But what about our jobs?" Morka asked, pointing to the thousands of Zirians who worked in the human mines. "What about our families? We depend on this work to live." Taehyun looked at the alien who had become his friend over many years. "I am sorry," he said, "but orders are orders. We have to go." Across the galaxy, the same scene was happening on hundreds of worlds. On the great trade station Nexus Prime, merchant Kyungsoo Bay was closing down the human commercial district. This was a huge area of shops, restaurants, and businesses that employed over 2 million aliens of different species. The Zenthari Guild masters were practically begging him to stay. These aliens looked like giant crabs with golden shells, and they were known across the galaxy as the best traders. But even they were panicking now. "Please, friend Kyungsoo," said Guildmaster Zeltar, his voice shaking. "Without human trade, our economy will collapse. Half the galaxy's commerce flows through human networks. You cannot just disappear." Kyungsoo packed the last of his personal items into a small box. His family had run this trading post for 50 years. "I do not want to leave," he said honestly, "but my government has spoken. We are no longer welcome in council space." "But this is madness." Zeltar's eyestalks waved frantically. "The council only meant to punish your military. They did not mean to destroy the economy of half the galaxy. Maybe they should have thought about that before they voted." Kyungsoo replied, sealing the box. On the bridge of the command ship, communications specialist Eugene Kong was watching her screens fill up with incoming messages. "Admiral," she called out, "we are receiving thousands of calls from council worlds. They want humanitarian aid, emergency food supplies, medical assistance. Some are offering to pay triple the normal rates for basic goods." Admiral Dongwu did not even look up from his own screen. "All communications are to be ignored," he said coldly. "We are ghosts now. As far as the council is concerned, humanity no longer exists in their space." "Sir," Eugene said hesitantly, "some of these calls are from refugee camps. They say they will starve without our food shipments." The Admiral's face was like stone. The council made their choice. They said they did not need our help. Let them prove it. But deep in the darkness of space, far from any planet or star, Scout Commander Sung-Ho Lim was seeing something that made his blood run cold. His long-range sensors, the most advanced in the galaxy, had picked up movement in the void between galaxies. "Computer, enhance image Sector 77 Alpha," he whispered. The screen zoomed in, and Sung-Ho felt his heart stop. There, moving through space like a vast cloud of metal insects, was a void swarm, just like Ambassador Jin-Ho had warned, just like all the reports had predicted. He immediately sent an emergency message to Earth. Swarm confirmed. First wave detected. Size massive. Estimated time to outer rim worlds. 6 months. Back on Nexus Prime, the lights were going out. Without human energy supplies, whole sections of the station were shutting down. Alien families packed their belongings, trying to find transport anywhere that might still have food and power. On Zirion, the mining equipment was gone, but the huge holes in the ground remained. The planet's economy had been destroyed in 2 days. Elder Morka stood looking at the empty human settlement, wondering how his people would survive. Across 12 sectors, the story was the same. Hospitals closed because they had no human medical supplies. Spaceports shut down because human shipping companies were gone. Factories stopped working because human raw materials no longer arrived. The Galactic Council had wanted to punish humanity for being too warlike. Instead, they had accidentally destroyed their own civilization. And in the darkness beyond the galaxy's edge, something hungry and terrible was coming to finish the job they had started. The galaxy had chosen to stand alone. Soon, they would learn what that really meant. The void swarm hit the mining world of Kepler. 7 at dawn on a Tuesday. The attack lasted exactly 17 minutes. Colonel Min-Soo Park sat in Earth's deep space monitoring station, watching the live feed from hidden cameras the humans had left behind. His aide, Lieutenant Boram Song, stood beside him with her mouth open in shock. Record everything, Min-Soo said quietly. The Council needs to see what they refuse to prepare for. On the screen, the sky above Kepler 7 turned black. But it was not clouds or night. It was machines. Millions and millions of small metal creatures that moved like a swarm of angry bees. Each one was about the size of a human hand, with sharp edges and glowing red eyes. The swarm descended on the planet like a living blanket of death. They ate everything they touched. Buildings, trees, vehicles, people. It all turned to gray dust in seconds. The screaming lasted only a few minutes before there was no one left to scream. How long until they reached the next world? Boram asked, her voice shaking. At that speed? For days, Min-Soo replied. He picked up his communication device and sent the footage to Earth's military command. The Council Defense Fleet is about to learn a hard lesson. The Council's defense ships arrived at the Helio system 3 days later. Admiral Kreetal of the Etherans commanded the fleet from her crystal battleship. The Etherans were proud people who looked like tall, thin humans made of living glass. They had not fought a real war in over 500 years. All ships, prepare for engagement, Kreetal ordered. Activate energy shields and charge plasma weapons. Her ships were beautiful, sleek and elegant, designed more for showing off than for fighting. They had been built to stop pirates and smugglers, not to face an enemy like this. The void swarm came out of hyperspace, like a black tsunami. There were so many of them that they blocked out the stars. The Council ships opened fire with their fancy plasma beams and energy missiles. Nothing happened. The swarm units were too small and moved too randomly for the big ship weapons to hit them. It was like trying to shoot individual raindrops with a cannon. Shields are failing, screamed the weapons officer on Kreetal's bridge. They are eating through the energy barriers. The swarm covered the Council ships like ants on a piece of candy. The creatures began to dissolve the hulls, turning metal and plastic into dust. Within minutes, the beautiful crystal ships were breaking apart. Admiral Kreetal's final message was broadcast across the galaxy. They cannot be stopped with conventional weapons. Warn the other fleets. Tell them. The transmission cut to static as her ship crumbled into glowing fragments. On the planet New Sol in human space, President Wu Jin-Han sat in his war room with his closest advisors. Intelligence Director Eun Young Kim was showing him holographic maps of the galaxy. How many worlds have fallen? The president asked. 47 in the past week, Eun Young replied. The Council fleets cannot even slow them down. They are abandoning entire star systems without a fight. Defense Secretary Jun Seo pulled up new images on the main screen. The swarm moves in 3 main groups. Each group has roughly 10 million units. They consume everything organic and most metals, then move to the next target. What about the refugee situation? Asked the president. Catastrophic, Young answered. The council worlds are in complete panic. They are fighting each other for the remaining safe planets. The Zenthri and the Kethvar started shooting at each other yesterday over refugee camp supplies. On the Etherin homeworld, the crystal spires that had stood for 1,000 years were melting. The surviving Etherins watched in horror as their most sacred buildings turned into puddles of glowing liquid. Defense Minister Velkara tried desperately to contact the human embassy, but found only empty buildings. "Where are the humans?" she screamed at her aide. "They warned us about this. They must have a plan." But the humans were long gone, and their communication channels stayed silent. The proud Nexri fleet, which had once laughed at human weapons, discovered that their advanced plasma arrays could not track the chaotic movement of the swarm. Captain Morta watched his flagship sensors go crazy as millions of targets appeared and disappeared faster than the computers could count. "Fire everything," he ordered. "Use all weapons." The Nexri ships unleashed enough firepower to destroy a small moon. Beautiful streams of energy lit up space like a fireworks display. When the light faded, the swarm was still there, completely undamaged. "Impossible," Morta whispered. Then the swarm reached his ship, and he whispered no more. Back on Earth, President Han looked out his office window at the orbital defense platforms floating in space around the planet. These were the weapons the Council had demanded be removed, calling them too aggressive for civilized beings. "How much time do we have?" he asked Ji-hoon. "If they maintain current speed, 18 months before they reach our outer colonies," came the reply. The president nodded slowly. "More than enough time to finish our preparations. Have all our hidden shipyards increase production to maximum." "Yes, sir. Project Prometheus is ahead of schedule." President Han smiled grimly. "Good. Let the galaxy see what happens when they reject protection of those they call warmongers. Soon, they will learn the difference between human-controlled aggression and mindless destruction." Outside his window, Earth's secret weapons gleamed in the sunlight, ready for war. The Galactic Council chamber looked very different now. Half the seats were empty because those species no longer existed. The beautiful decorations were gone, sold to buy food for refugee camps. Where once thousands of proud representatives had sat, now only a few hundred desperate survivors remained. Chancellor Kreetal of the surviving Etherins pointed one of her crystal fingers at the Luminari delegate. Her once beautiful form was cracked and dim like broken glass. "Your peace-loving philosophy killed billions," she screamed, her voice echoing in the nearly empty chamber. "The humans warned us, and you call them warmongers." The Luminari representative flickered, like a dying light bulb. Where once she had been bright and confident, now she was barely visible. "We wanted peace," she whispered. "How could we know the swarm would be so terrible?" "Because the humans told us." Kreetal shot back. "They showed us pictures. They gave us reports. But you were too proud to listen to those violent primitives." In the back of the chamber, the few remaining Kethvar delegates sat in angry silence. Their home world was gone, consumed by the swarm 3 weeks ago. Now they lived on refugee ships, begging for food and shelter from anyone who would help. The Zenthri Guild masters were the angriest of all. These crab-like aliens had built their entire civilization on trade and commerce. Now, with most of the galaxy destroyed and humanity gone, there was nothing left to buy or sell. "My people are eating garbage." Guildmaster Zeltar clicked his claws together furiously. "Our children cry for food while you debate politics. We need action, not more talking." The arguments grew louder and more violent. Ancient enemies who had been forced to work together in the council were now blaming each other for everything that had gone wrong. On the fortress world of New Seoul, Admiral Dongwoo Choi received his daily intelligence report from Colonel Park. The colonel appeared on the holographic screen, looking tired but determined. "The situation in council space is getting worse," Park reported. "The Kethvar and Etherin started a shooting war yesterday. They are fighting over the last habitable planet, in Sector 7. What about the refugee situation? Dongwu asked. Terrible. The Nexari are refusing to share their food supplies with other species. The Zenthari are charging huge prices for basic medicine. Some refugee camps have no power or clean water. Any communication attempts from the council? Park nodded grimly. Every day, Chancellor Kreetal sends personal messages begging for help. The Luminari offer to give us their entire remaining fleet. Even the proud Nexari are asking us to come back. And President Han's response? Complete radio silence. As far as the outside galaxy knows, humanity has vanished. Deep beneath the surface of Earth, in secret military facilities that the Council had never known about, the greatest weapons project in human history was reaching completion. Chief Engineer Young Sik Moon stood before a massive wall of screens, showing construction progress across dozens of hidden bases. Admiral, he reported to Defense Secretary Ji-hoon Seo, the new kinetic bombardment platforms are fully operational. Power output is 300% above anything the Council has ever seen. What about the special projects? Ji-hoon asked. Dr. Soo-Jean Park looked up from her computer workstation. She had been working for 18 months without a break, developing humanity's most secret weapon. The neural disruptor network is ready for testing, she announced. If our theories about the swarm's hive mind are correct, this could end the war in hours instead of years. And the new fleet? 600 warships completed and ready for combat. Young Sik replied, These are not the ships we showed the Council. These were designed for total war, not peacekeeping. Above them, President Woo Jin-han stood in his office looking at a holographic map of the entire galaxy. Red zone showed areas controlled by the Void Swarm, which now covered almost half of all inhabited space. Yellow zone showed areas where refugees were fighting each other. Green zone showed the small areas still under some kind of organized control. And blue zone showed human space, untouched, defended, and growing stronger every day. Sir, his aide Kyung-min Lee entered the office with the latest reports. The Council is calling another emergency session. They want to formally apologize and beg us to return. Let them beg, the president said coldly. They had their chance to listen. The refugee numbers are getting very bad. Kyung-min continued. Billions of people are homeless. Many are starving. President Han was quiet for a long moment. I know, he said finally, but they chose this path when they rejected our warnings. Every death, every destroyed world, every refugee, that is the price of their arrogance. Outside his window, the orbital defense platforms moved in perfect formation around Earth. These were the weapons the Council had called too aggressive for civilized society. Soon, the galaxy would see what real human aggression looked like. How much longer until the swarm reaches our borders? The president asked. For months, sir. President Han smiled, but it was not a kind smile. Perfect. That gives us just enough time to show the galaxy what happens when you abandon those who were willing to protect you. In the darkness of space, the Void Swarm continued its advance, unaware that humanity was waiting for them with weapons that would make the Council's old fears seem like children's toys. The reckoning was coming. The Void Swarm reached human space on a Tuesday morning. The attack everyone had been waiting for finally came. Admiral Dongwu Choi stood on the bridge of the U.S. Retribution, the biggest warship humanity had ever built. Around him, officers who had trained in secret for years prepared for the battle that would decide the fate of the galaxy. Swarm vessels detected on long-range sensors, reported Captain Haiji Nam, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were facing. Admiral, the computer is having trouble counting them all. There are over 50,000 units in the first wave alone. Dongwu looked at the tactical display, showing a black cloud of mechanical death approaching human space. This was the moment they had been preparing for since the day they walked out of the council chamber. Activate Prometheus Protocol, he commanded calmly. Across human space, things that had looked like ordinary mining stations and communication satellites suddenly came to life. These were not peaceful installations. They were weapons platforms disguised to look harmless. The Council had never known they existed. Giant rail guns emerged from hidden compartments. Massive laser rays unfolded like deadly flowers. Kinetic bombardment systems that could throw asteroids like bullets powered up with deep humming sound. The first strike was perfect. Coordinated beams of pure energy and streams of metal projectiles moving at incredible speed carved to the swarm formations like a hot knife through butter. In the first minute of combat, humanity destroyed more swarm units than the entire Council fleet had managed in months of fighting. On Earth, Dr. Sue Jean Park watched her computer screens with intense concentration. Neural Disruptor Network is online, she announced to President Wu Jin-han, targeting the swarm's hive mind connection. She pressed a single button. The effect was immediate and devastating. The swarm units, which had always moved in perfect coordination, suddenly began flying into each other. Their hive mind, the collective intelligence that controlled millions of mechanical creatures, was being scrambled by humanity's most secret weapon. It's working. Dr. Sue Jean shouted with joy. They can't communicate with each other anymore. President Han watched the battle displays with satisfaction. Begin Phase 2, he ordered. From hidden bases in asteroid fields and on the dark sides of dead moons, humanity's true fleet emerged. These were not the ships they had shown the Council during peace negotiations. These were warships built for total destruction. Colonel Min-Soo Park, now promoted to fleet commander, led the counterattack from his flagship. The human ships moved with deadly precision, using weapons that the Council had banned as too dangerous for civilized warfare. Quantum torpedoes that could tear holes in space itself. Gravity weapons that crushed enemy ships into tiny metal balls. Matter disintegrators that simply made things stop existing. The technology was terrifying and beautiful at the same time. The Void Swarm, which had destroyed dozens of civilizations and consumed countless worlds, met humanity's fury and shattered like glass hitting a steel wall. Within 72 hours, the invasion was over. Not only had humanity stopped the swarm, but their fleets were now hunting down every remaining unit in the galaxy. Liberation forces reached the occupied worlds, rescuing survivors and systematically destroying every trace of swarm presence. On the ruined world of Zirion, where Foreman Taehyun had once supervised mining operations, human marines landed to find a handful of survivors hiding in underground caves. Elder Morka, the tree-like alien leader, wept when he saw humans in their familiar uniforms. "You came back," he whispered. "Even after we abandoned you, you came back to save us." Marine Sergeant Ji-won Kim helped the old alien to his feet. "We didn't come back for the Council," she said gently. "We came back because it was the right thing to do." The galaxy watched in stunned amazement as humanity accomplished in weeks what the Council couldn't do in years of fighting. The swarm that seemed unstoppable was being systematically erased from existence. On the rebuilt Council station, now under human protection, a small shuttle arrived carrying the last survivors of the major alien species. They found President Wu Jin-han waiting for them in what had once been the Grand Council chamber. Chancellor Kretal entered first, her crystal form now dim and cracked from months of stress and fear. Behind her came the flickering Luminari delegate and the few remaining Zenthari Guild masters. They all looked broken and ashamed. "You tried to warn us," Kretal said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We called you warmongers and cast you out. We were fools." "Yes," President Han replied simply, without anger or satisfaction, just stating a fact. "We thought we were civilized," the Luminari delegate said. "We thought violence was always wrong, that there was always a peaceful solution." "There's always a peaceful solution," the president said. "But sometimes the only way to achieve peace is to be stronger than those who would destroy it." The Zenthari Guild Master Zeltar stepped forward, his golden shell dull with exhaustion. "What happens now? What do you want from us?" President Han looked at each of them, these beings who had once judged humanity too violent for civilized society. "Nothing," he said calmly. "You have already given us the most valuable thing possible." "What is that?" "You taught us that the galaxy needs guardians. Someone willing to stand watch in the darkness, while others sleep peacefully. The Council wanted peace without strength, safety without sacrifice. Now you understand why that doesn't work." He walked to the great windows showing space, where human patrol ships moved in protective formations around the station. "Human fleets will guard the outer rim. Not because you asked us to, but because someone has to. We learned something important from this war. Peace is not the absence of conflict. Peace is what happens when good people are strong enough to keep evil away from those who cannot defend themselves. As President Han left the chamber, the surviving council members finally understood what they had lost when they abandoned the council table. They had lost their protectors, their guardians, their shield against the dark. But humanity, despite everything, had chosen to be that shield anyway. The galaxy was safe again, and everyone knew who had made it so.